If machine learning algorithms are just math, why do we need ethicists? I'm Tanya Hall for ZDNet, and joining me is Kathryn Hume. She is the Vice President of Product and Strategy at integrate.ai. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thanks so much for having me, Tanya.
So what type of work do you do at integrate.ai?
Well, I do all sorts of work. So I'm working in a startup. Integrate was founded in about a year ago in early 2017. And our company works with large consumer enterprises, so retail banks, insurance companies, media companies, retailers, et cetera, that have lots of information about people and their behaviors. And we are building an AI interchange that enables companies to do more with machine learning when they work on our platform than they'd be able to do if they were to just build models on their own. And this, as you might imagine, because we're sort of sharing data between different environments, raises all sorts of questions related to ethics and fairness and privacy and what companies can and can't do. But it really is the foundations for the traditional enterprise to be able to compete and stay competitive in the age of Amazon, Facebook, Google, you name it. And then my work there, I lead product and strategy, which encompasses actually multiple roles. So I do a lot of work on AI research, so liaisons with the academic community to stay on top of the latest and greatest in machine learning techniques. And then I lead our work on ethics and trust. So figuring out what kind of security, privacy features we should bake into our platform to make sure that nothing untoward happens with the data.
You just spoke at O'Reilly Media AI Conference on the topic of building an AI-first enterprise culture. So what challenges do large enterprises have or face today when trying to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Sure. So I like to surprise people when I give talks. And my first slides were a picture of Osama bin Laden's compound in Pakistan. And you say, what does this have to do with AI, right? And what does it have to do with building an enterprise AI culture? So I brought it up because President Obama, in the months leading up to trying to identify where bin Laden was located, he consulted with a set of experts who gave him a range of probabilities on the likelihood that bin Laden was indeed where they thought he was, in Abbottabad, Pakistan. And these likelihoods ranged from we're 95% sure that he's there down to we're 30% sure that he might be there. And you can imagine, as an executive, you're trying to figure out, you're trying to make a decision based on these probabilities, and it becomes really confusing and difficult. So my talk tried to show that it's that type of difficulty, estimating between a range of probabilities and trying to make a really good decision for your business, that is the essence of all of the cultural issues in adopting AI.
What standards should be in place when making the decisions to replace humans with automations and settings where, property, life safety, for example, and those types of issues are in play?
Well, I mean, it depends on the enterprise, right? So those issues that you're talking about, where it's about safety and safety of humans, safety of property, et cetera, that's really key in manufacturing use cases, right? Where you're going to have robots that are wandering around an environment where humans might be located, and because again, going back to this example with Obama, they're probabilistic systems, so they may or may not have actually encountered a situation that they come across in the world in the past. And if it hadn't been encoded into the system, the way we think about former computer programming paradigms, where we know what's going to happen, we say, if this, then that. When we go to machine learning, we might not have encountered certain edge cases, and then the robot might behave in ways that we just can't predict, right? Because we haven't foreseen it in the past. So those are the sort of issues that arise often in manufacturing settings. And there's a lot of thorough upfront work that needs to be done to try to think about these edge cases and get ahead of them so that we have some means of predicting them and controlling them. In the consumer enterprise setting, using digital products, et cetera, that same logic holds for minorities. So we might build a model and it does great with lots of, let's say, white Caucasian males, because they tend to be the customers that have worked historically with the business of, let's say you're providing like men's beauty products or something like that. When a new customer comes who doesn't look like the customers you've had in the past, the product won't work that well. And so something that provides a magical, amazing experience for certain consumers is just kind of random for others. And that can lead to alienation for your consumer population and basically just expose a lot of the underlying biases in society.
And it sounds almost like profiling. I mean, profiling an airport security line has received a lot of criticism in the past and even today. And But isn't artificial intelligence predicting someone's odds of being, I don't know, a criminal, or what they might even purchase, or the actions they might take, using facial recognition to predict personality traits, or are they all just other forms of profiling?
Well, yeah, I mean, that last example you gave of using facial recognition to predict personality traits, this is basically pseudoscience that's been debunked a long time ago, right? So way back in the early 20th century, there was a set of people, you know, working in academia who thought that they could predict if somebody would become a criminal, or predict if they were good or bad for society based upon the shape of their nose or whatever it may be. And we went through World War II, right, and saw some of the really horrific atrocities that can lead to when it's sort of systematized at scale. And I think some of colleagues of mine who work in the ethics and fairness community are trying to help people understand that there's nothing intrinsic to the people, right? And so when we build machine learning systems, they're really great. They're trained on data, and that data includes human judgments. They're not actually objective, non-partial, purely technological systems. They're systems that do a great job at amplifying what we do out in the world as humans. So I like to think of them as convex mirrors that refract our own perceptions of ourselves, as opposed to these sort of neutral, scientific, non-human type machines. And it's a reset. It's much more, interestingly enough, it's not as much of a technology problem as it is a perception and interpretation problem. And often a lot of the engineers that are building these systems are not thinking that way, because they didn't go to school to think about critical issues around social constructs of identity and what's right and what's wrong. So you know, some of the work we need to do is in the education field, to ensure that people are thinking about these issues critically when they build the systems.
So what's wrong with the development process then? I mean, I get it. We're human, and humans are building these algorithms. What can we do to prevent bias from creeping into those algorithms?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to think about this. So one of the big things is to know that when we build a machine learning product, it's not just the algorithm. There's many more steps, some of which are around data collection, right? So we can be really mindful and just look and do an audit of the means in which we go about collecting data about people, and maybe noticing that we've got a ton of data about, say, one gender or one race and very little about the other. And then going out and proactively trying to level set that to get a little bit more of a fair distribution across different populations. The next comes into, you know, when we're processing the features that are going to be relevant for a model, there's means to, you know, build out the model, see if it's performing well against the objective task that we've set for a particular problem that we're trying to solve, and then go back and audit it. And just verify, pick a couple of columns, pick a couple of variables, and see if there's in any way differential performance across different settings. The biggest thing, there's a lot of discourse these days around interpretability. So we want to be able to explain why the model did what it did. And depending on the model type, sometimes that's not always simple, but like relatively easy. And sometimes it gets really hard. So notoriously, deep learning, these deep neural networks, because they are using so many different parameters and layers of computation in order to take input data and tease out the abstract features that are going to be relevant for some task in their you know, the output that they're looking for. This is notoriously hard, and even the engineers that are building them aren't quite sure why the system's doing what it's doing. So my take there as a solve is to say, well, there's some great research to try to fix this problem, but we can reverse engineer the problem and say, let's just focus on the distribution of outcomes we're trying to achieve. We don't need to always explain the model. We need to have accountability regarding the types of actions and outputs that we want to achieve in the world. And we can indeed we can sort of bookend the process and focus on eliminating bias on from the data collection and then the data output standpoint.
So who decides what's right and fair? I mean, is it a statistical test that's involved in kind of making these determinations?
That's a great question. So the statistical test would be involved, but there also needs to be an objective regarding what kind of statistical patterns they're looking for. And that is the decision often of all of us, when we're lobbying companies, when we can go out and try to put our foot down to think about what is fair in society. And that consumer voice can then impact the decision that executives need to be making related to the accountability and fairness in their own use of technology. So my proposition is that this needs to be, it's sort of like the standard, it takes a village. It's not on the shoulders of the data scientist or the technologist to be making decisions that impact a lot of people in society when they go to do their job, which is to develop technology that achieves a quantified objective function and task. What that task should be optimized for is the decision of the people in the company, is the decision potentially when we go to another macro level of the policymakers and regulators who set potential policy outcomes across a given jurisdiction in society. So we all have a voice here. Today, there's few and far between are the executives that are thinking about the sustainable goals of the way in which this technology will impact a population. And what I think we need to do is make that part of the dialogue, so that consumers have a voice in saying they don't really want to work for companies if they're not thinking about the greater good.
That's an excellent point. So how does this machine learning community address concerns then on transparency, or how should they look at transparency?
Yeah, so there's, all of these soft policy terms, transparency, accountability, fairness, have their analog as technical problems. So there's means of working with algorithms, analyzing the distribution of features within a data set, so that you can there's some work from some colleagues of ours over at the University of Toronto where they've made auto-encoded, if your listeners are familiar with the term auto-encoder, so basically replicas of data sets that retain their power and performance against a given machine learning objective task, but are transformed in some way using slightly different properties of a distribution so that they're more fair. So from the technical community's perspective, it's transforming a set of social values into really thorny quantitative optimization problems that can achieve the more policy-oriented goals.
Kathryn, I really appreciate your time and joining me today for shedding a little light on, even though all of this is around an algorithm, we need ethicists to help us get through it. And you're certainly a great point of view on that. If somebody wants to connect with you, how can they go about doing that?
There's a couple of ways. So on Twitter, I'm at Hume Kathryn. So my name, Kathryn Hume, but inverted backwards. Connect with me on LinkedIn. My profile's up there. And then easy to reach out to us at info@integrate.ai.
All right. Thanks again, Kathryn, for your time. And if you guys want to connect with me, you certainly can right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or find me at my website, tanyahall.net. I have links to all my social channels. And if you'd like to chat, find me on Twitter at @TanyaHallRadio. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.